Thank you again, Ambassador Yamamoto. We'll now begin the question and answer portion of today's call. For those asking questions, please state your name and affiliation, and we'd ask that you limit yourself to one question. We have a lot of participants today, and we are discussing Secretary of State's trip to Africa and U.S.-Africa strategy. Again, for those of you listening to the call in English, you can press *1 to join the question queue. If you're using a speakerphone, you may have to pick up the handset. For those listening in French and Portuguese, if you have questions, you can submit them by email to afmediahub@state.gov. Ambassador Yamamoto, I'll ask the first question that we received in advance from Coletta Wanjoki from Ethiopia with Feature Story News Agency. What is the Secretary's specific mission in Ethiopia, particularly in light of the United States statement related to the recent declaration of emergency? Can you discuss what his focus will be with Ethiopian counterparts?
Okay. So going to Ethiopia is really an important stop because it's a host for the African Union. And so on the one hand, he'll be meeting with Musa Faki and the African Union commissioners to talk about the fundamental issues that are challenging Africa, which is the South Sudan, DRC, Somalia, also the G5 country and support for security. But more important is looking at economic growth opportunities. And again, we look at the African Union as the umbrella arm for the entire Africa region. The second thing is going to Ethiopia is that we're looking at a transition of a prime minister. What is that going to hold? And Ethiopia plays a really critical role, not only because it is the number one troop-contributing country to peacekeeping operations, and really that's really very unique anywhere in the world, is that Africa really dominates and predominates in its own security. Just one factoid that I keep on giving is, 63% of UN operations are in Africa. 87% of the world's UN troops are in Africa. But over 50%, if you include the African Union, then it brings up to 70% of all peacekeeping troops in Africa. And really, in a lot of peacekeeping operations in the world, are Africans. And so Africa is doing its part with sacrifices and commitment. Now, going to Ethiopia specific is that we're looking at not only the transition of a prime minister, but also the institution and the strengthening of institutions. We're also looking at the problems in the Oromia and the Somali region, and we're looking at probably about 1 million people displaced. The issue comes in is how is it that we're going to address and support and resolve the tensions? And, this is not unique to Ethiopia. We're looking at, throughout the continent, a lot of areas where we're having problems over land development and land rights, water rights, ethnic, tribal, religious, geographic issues and challenges and tensions. And so we want to know is how can we, the United States, play a role in supporting resolving of tensions and problems, and then really looking and addressing all the other challenges that we face in Ethiopia. The other issue, too, is, again, human rights issues that we're looking at, as well as all of this contributing to stronger institution building in Ethiopia, and for Ethiopia to continue to play a positive role regionally and Africa continent-wide, and also for the people of Ethiopia. Over.
Thanks, Ambassador. We'll stay with Ethiopia for a moment. Our embassy in Addis Ababa is hosting a listening party. If you could state your name and ask your question, please, from the listening party in Ethiopia.
Thank you very much. My name is Burhan Fakad. I work for the Reporter newspaper. His Excellency, Rex Tillerson's visit comes at a time when Ethiopia is having a very critical political crisis. And at the same time, his visit is going to be overlapped by his visit of the foreign affairs minister from Russia, Sergei Lavrov. So, does it mean is it a coincidence, or there is something going on that these two countries are focusing on this in this country? Can we know something going on behind the screen that they are going to talk about political issues in East Africa with that respect? Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you very much for your comments and also to your paper. So if you look at what the Secretary is going into, I kind of remind you that the UAE Foreign Minister will be there as well as Lavrov from Russia. But the Secretary's focus is clearly and squarely on the African Union and on Ethiopia. Those are the two main focal points, and all the meetings will be focused on those officials. Again, we're looking at what is the Ethiopians looking at on transition. I think that'll be a point of interest, is what is the next government going to look like? How is it that the United States can play a role supporting the new administration? But let me just kind of go to you that Ethiopia is not unique in the transitions that it's undergoing. And transitions are good. Transitions really signal changes and modifications to strengthen of institutions. So you look at Kenya, you have Odinga and Kenyatta. You have Nigeria, you have the election in Nigeria coming up next year, probably the most important election in Africa in the next 18 months. And then you go to Ethiopia itself is another political transition. So it's not unique, but it's very important for the stability of not only the country but also the region. And so the focus is not on what Lavrov is doing or the UAE, but what on the Ethiopians are going to do, and also the African Union. Over.
We have time for just one last question at the U.S. Embassy in Ethiopia. If you could identify yourself and name your outlet and ask your question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Ambassador, in your my name is Omar Radi for Spanish News Agency, Ethiopia correspondent. Ambassador, you mentioned that in your brief at the beginning that you're looking at the transition of Prime Minister in Ethiopia. I want to emphasize on who the Secretary of State is going to meet in Ethiopia. If you name few. Also, you mentioned that you're looking at problems in Oromia region and Somali regions and the displacement of people. Is he going to speak to any regional officials? Thank you.
No, as you know, the Secretary, thank you for the question. The Secretary's trip is very quick. It's not going to be we wish we could spend more time on the ground, but given the demands back here in Washington and also the things that we want to achieve in Africa, it's going to be very tight schedule. He's obviously going to be meeting with the leadership, so the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, and the government, and the embassy, and a few others. Is he going to meet the regional states? I doubt there's time to do that. We'll be briefing the Secretary on the developments, not only in Oromia and Somalia, but it's really across the continent. It's in Kenya, it's Nigeria, it's the DRC, it's Sudan. And those are questions and issues. The other issue, too, that we need to discuss with Ethiopia is that it's the lead in the discussions in South Sudan. And, you know, if you look at South Sudan, 2.5 million refugees from Sudan into Uganda and even into Ethiopia. You got over 2 million internally displaced. So if you consider what is happening in South Sudan, they probably form about 25 to 30% of the total number of displaced refugees in all of Africa, and that's a major problem. And along with the DRC, those form the two major problems on refugee flows and internally displaced. And again, Ethiopia plays a critical role in those areas. So those are a discussion. And also on Somalia, peace and stability there. And then again, the institution building and what more we can do to support and help Ethiopia and its people and community development across the country. And again, Ethiopia with this 8 to 9% economic growth rate really is kind of a bellwether and a economic stability for the region. So Ethiopia is a very complex country, as is Kenya and Nigeria, where he's visiting. But also it holds a lot of opportunities, and we need to work with the government, the people, opposition groups, local groups, community groups, regional groups, and I refer you to our Ambassador Michael Rayner on the bilateral mission and Ambassador Mary Beth Leonard on the African Union side, who are doing an amazing job, a fabulous job, just working these issues and supporting and assisting and advising us. And I think interviewing them, you really get a true sense of the depth and breadth of our policy approach to Ethiopia and also to the region. And thank you very much for your questions.